Have you ever wondered what it's like to work for one of the largest fintech companies in the world? Join Technologists of Color on September 29th for a day in the life at BlackRock, a fireside chat. Check the description below for more information about this exciting event. Listen now as we have a chat with a BlackRock employee about his personal journey in the tech industry. Good morning.
Good.
How is your day going?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself, man?
Today's been pretty great. Setting up for this interview, been looking forward to it for a while. Um, and I'm sure the viewers and the listeners are anxious to hear about you and your story. And I want to start by welcoming you to the TOC podcast. So, Technologists of Color. We are here to provide a growth platform uh, for Black technologists, and we're working with BlackRock, and we're happy to have you join us and talk about what you do and how you got into the industry, and just to get to know more about you so that people can get an entry into what it's like to be Black in technology, and just a personal story about how things are going on. So I want to give
Awesome.
you the platform to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity. Definitely excited to talk with you today. My name is Jerek Wilson. I am a computer engineer. I've been in software for a little over a decade now. Graduated from Clemson University, 2011. So now I just aged myself. So there you go. Um, Yeah, man. So been working in Atlanta the entire time. I've had a chance to work for a number of different companies in a number of different industries. So at this point, I feel like I've had my toe in a little bit of everything, and I'm excited to answer any questions you might have.
Right. So a Clemson alum. So moving over to Atlanta wasn't, you were still in the South, but how was the change in locale after college, and how you like the Atlanta area?
Gotcha. Man, Atlanta's a big city, man. Like before Clemson, man, I grew up in a small town, Orangeburg, South Carolina, man. So like completely, country town, man. So to move to the big city, man, it was a big change, man. But I was excited. I was looking for a change and looking for opportunity, and Atlanta is full of both. So I was super excited when I landed here. Luckily, my wife now was already here, so it was kind of like a smooth transition with her family and everything. So yeah, man, the transition's been good, man. I love the city. I don't think I want to live anywhere else.
Excellent. Well, we're happy to have you. So growing up, did you get an opportunity to interact with a lot of individuals who look like yourself who were in the tech industry?
No, not really. I think like the closest thing to like a black engineer was probably my dad who worked for a local company down up the street from where we lived. But for me, I got into it just kind of on a whim. I was like, oh well, I kind of like computers. I kind of like the idea behind them. I'm a little bit of a gamer, so I grew up that way. And I was like, oh, well, what would I need to do to actually like, do that kind of thing? Oh, well, you need to learn a little bit about computers. Cool. So as a teenager, man, I would be asking my dad, hey, bring me all your old computer parts. Let me put them together. Let me see what happens. To this day, my mom can attest that there's a graveyard of old computer parts still in my bedroom that I need to clean up. Sorry, mom.
Well, that's great because that's kind of my story as well. And being a tinkerer, right, in addition to teaching you skills, it takes away the fear, right, of messing with technology that a lot of people who are changing industries or who are getting into it later in life might have. But if you've been breaking things your whole life and figuring out that it'll be okay, that's a great experience to have, right?
Absolutely.
Excellent. And so you come to Atlanta and you're in the tech industry, you have a computer science background, and can you tell me a little bit about like where you started, what that first experience was like?
Right, right. So when I first got here, I worked at a company of probably about 150 people called Navicure. They're no longer called Navicure. They got acquired a little while ago. I think they're calling themselves Waystar now. But yeah, it was my first job in. I was doing a lot of, I guess, what you would call tech grunt work. Hey, go put these log messages here. Go figure this thing out. But it was me like understanding the system that I'm in. As a technologist, one of the first things you do with them, regardless of the job, regardless of how long you've been working, is you're gonna have to understand the system that you're in. So like those small minuscule tasks at first that may seem minuscule is actually really good because by the time they gave me something of substance, I already knew where X files were, understood this process, and it made life a little bit easier.
Great. So you got yourself acclimated to the system, got to apply the things that you already learned, and then by the time you actually had to get around to solving a problem, you were more comfortable. And then, as you said, you've been tinkering for a while, so the tinkering process of that was pretty comfortable for you. Um,
Yeah,
and
that's it.
yeah, that's great. So, what would you say to someone who was starting out, right, looking back on that first experience and say, what did you kind of do right? What did you kind of do wrong? That if you had a chance to tinker again with that experience, that you might change.
Uh, give yourself grace. Like you're learning, especially as entry level, right? Entry level is a great place to be because the expectations are is that you're learning on the job, right? But you've by getting that job, you've already shown the people who hired you that you qualify, that you belong where you belong. So mistakes are going to happen. Just own the mistakes, try to figure out why the mistakes happen, keep in close contact with your team members and your manager, keep that conversation going and just keep learning. As long as you're learning and you're trying, you can't fail.
That's great advice. That's great advice. A lot of people look upon mistakes as kind of like an unfortunate experiment in data that they can't do it, as opposed to looking at as an opportunity to kind of figure out how they do things differently, how they might approach the problem differently. So, in addition to the learning that you were acquiring in that early steps, what did you get not just from the interaction with the technology, but perhaps your peers or your coworkers? Is there anything that you learned from that early experience that you think you'd go back? And in addition to giving yourself grace in terms of your work, what do you think about the people process?
Oh, the people I work with were great. Some of the people that I started with on my first job are still some of my best friends today. And what I say to that is people are a great resource. If you open yourself up to asking for advice or some help here and there and giving it both ways, you'll build these relationships and these relationships will take you far in your career. I think that the people that I've met along the way are probably some of my greatest resources to this day, and I'm very thankful for them.
Well, that's great to hear because I think a lot of people who are doing things with tech, you know, kind of don't. I mean, we always hear soft skills, but as to knowing what those soft skills are, what they look like, but you know they're just showing up as a human being at work and doing all the things that humans do, right? Which is gathering your peers, your resources, mentors, and as you said, you've got friends, and it helps, I would think, right, to have somebody that you can not only talk about IP addresses and UX design and how to run this code and why it's not working, but also other things, right? So you can admit, perhaps, if you have made a mistake, right? Because you know you're talking to a friend. Would you say that that was useful in any way?
Oh, absolutely, man. There was plenty of times me and a group of guys, we were like, you know what? I can't figure this out. I'm getting segmentation faults and errors left and right. The database is crashing. I have no idea. And I'd have like two or three friends in each of those sections that I was working with. Hey, I got a database problem. Hey, Brett, can you help me out over here? Or, hey, Dallas, I'm working with some Linux code over here. Can you help me out with that? And it was just really good to be able to say, hey, I'm a little stuck. Let's talk about it. Hey, let's even talk about it over lunch. Let's go grab a bite. It doesn't have to be super formal, right? Like you're talking to people, man. And at the same time, they're like, hey, man, I'm dealing with some Java stuff. Can you help me out? Absolutely. And it's just that constant give and take and that support that kind of makes the difference.
Right. So, what would you say in terms of the difference was in what you learned in school, right? What that formal learning was like, and the way that you had to upskill yourself once you were in the market. I'm assuming that the language that you learned in college is not the only thing that you're programming in. The tools that you used in college aren't the only tools
Right.
you've ever been exposed to. So, how did you and how do you keep yourself up?
Gotcha. So answer the first part of that question. Like the differences is I learned very quickly that the whole entire point of learning code in school is to teach you how to code. Like most languages are very like it's syntax, right? You can learn the syntax, but learning how to code, learning how to put, X, Y, and Z where they need to go, learning logic, right? That's kind of what you learn. You take that and you apply it. And how I keep myself up to date. I stay curious, man. There's a lot of times where I'm just Googling around. It's like, okay, what's the hot new ticket today? Okay. At one point it was, JavaScript, and eventually it turned to TypeScript, and eventually it turned to Angular and React, and eventually it turned back to Java. And at some point, they started yelling out Spring Boot and microservices. Like you hear the keywords and then you're like, okay, well then let me dive into it. Let me try to write a sample piece of code, spend an hour just kind of diving into it, reading an article. Medium is pretty good for, those random tech articles. Tech Radar is another one that if you want to general tech in general. But yeah, man, you just stay curious. And if you hear a term that you don't really know, that's a perfect opportunity to go take some time to do some research.
Right. And are you still finding yourself challenged? Are you still interested? Is this still something that, hey, I chose correctly in terms of like the stuff that you're getting bombarded with?
Oh man, yeah, absolutely, man. You like the longer you do this, the more complex the problems get, man. It's never a dull day as a developer, man. If you're having a dull day, then I guess you've probably stayed a little too stagnant. Like you at that point you need to start asking, oh, let me do a stretched assignment to the left or to the right if you're not feeling challenged. But for me, man, if I look at my Outlook calendar right now, it is completely blue because I got millions of things to do with tech right now. We're talking to many different people, and then as you advance in your career, you start realizing that you transition from, I guess, the mentee role to the mentor role. And then that adds a whole nother layer, of things that you can do. And now instead of just you understanding it, you're trying to figure out the best way to explain it to those you may be working with or those under you. And that adds a whole nother layer to it as well.
So, going through your journey, right, starting off as a young developer, new to it, uh, creating those relationships, growing in your skill set, and then you said acting as a mentor and having to kind of um, give those skills to someone else, right? And it's being beneficial, right? Because you have to know it in order to be able to convey it to someone else. Um, how would you say, because now that as we look back at your journey and as you're moving through your different roles, right? How did that help in terms of leadership qualities or other things that aren't strictly technical, but they're very important?
Oh man, being able to show someone how to do something is it builds those leadership skills, right? Like there's a couple different ways that you kind of can advance in your career, and actually taking a leadership role is one of those ways. Another way, especially in the tech field, is kind of to be like a tech architect. But both of those, you are essentially guiding those behind you on how to do X, Y, and Z. So even if you feel like you're not in a leadership role, but you're taking the time to show someone how to do something, or hey, this might be a more efficient way of doing something, you are in effect building those leadership skills to the point where you are presented with an opportunity. You should feel pretty confident to say, hey, I'm willing to take that challenge.
Right. And how would you say also, um, because you've again had to go through a learning period, that you interact with people who may be newer, right, and helping them through in the same way that someone else might have helped you through in terms of it's going to be challenging. You might spend a good period of time looking for a misplaced comma, depending upon what your language of choice is at the moment, a word that's misspelled that, is not being caught, something that's not declared or some other challenge that when you look back at it, you're like, oh, that was a dumb mistake. But everybody makes them. And again, coming from a background myself, you kind of like, oh, okay, if we could get that hour back, that would be great. But you don't want to beat yourself up. Like, how do you display that to other people in terms of knowing that you need grace, giving that to other people as they make those
Right.
mistakes?
I mean, you kind of described it right there, man. We're human, man. We're gonna make mistakes, dude. Nobody's perfect all the time. Hell, nobody's perfect like ever. Like that's one of the key points. So like it's one of those things where if you and the team that you're working on, right? Like if you plan far enough ahead and you take the steps to understand like, all right, we're kind of trying to accomplish this. We have, let's say, 2 months to get this done, right? If you're working hard at the beginning of that, those mistakes only really hit hard when you're up against a time crunch, right? Like if I make a mistake and I only got like a day to do it, oh, it's a big problem. If a mistake happens and I have like 2 months to do it, it's like, well, okay, it's fine. So it's like, so you got to give yourself a little bit of leeway as far as the planning goes, but as far as just understanding that mistakes happen, yeah, they're going to come. Everybody's going to make them. Nobody in the tech industry is expecting somebody to come in and code flawless code. That's why we have unit tests. That's why we have all of these procedures in place. Like we make mistakes all the time, but that's why we build all of this infrastructure to help you like fix it before our client even sees it. So yeah, no, never coming to this expecting that you have to be perfect. There's checks and balances all across the board to help you out to make sure that that's never an issue.
That's great to hear that because a lot of people tend to, if they're new, right, look at the mistakes that they're making and not realizing that everybody is making those mistakes, as well as the fact that perhaps there are challenges that you just can't foresee, right?
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
yeah. So, is there anything that you prepare yourself for? I know there's like different things, like there's agile. We started off with waterfall or agile. We've got all these different ways of handling that. But from a personal standpoint, like how you deal with perhaps a change in strategy, a change in you get something back from either a client or an in-house person, and yesterday it was go left, and today it's go right. Like, how do you handle something like that?
And then the next day it's going to go back to go left. But so like the longer you do this, the longer you realize don't be attached to your code. And that may sound strange, right? But what that means to me is that always expect change.
Okay.
And like I go in every day saying, okay, I'm going to code this particular thing. I'll give you an example. Right now, I've been coding the front end page for one of the projects that I'm working on at BlackRock, and that page has changed about 6 times. So in the course of about a year, I've probably changed this page about 6 times. And if that change was something that really irked me in my soul, I'd be really hating my job right now, right? Because it's like, oh my God, I've put so much time, effort, sweat, and tears into this, and but expect change, and then learn to ask the questions that may help catch the change sooner, right? The longer you do this, the longer you're in the business, right? And because a lot of these things are like business decisions, they're not necessarily tech decisions, right? Like you're not going to change it because, well, I really wanted a drop down and I want a radio button, right? Like it's, hey, we spoke to the client. The client was like, I would really like to have this data displayed this way. So now we have to change it, right? So now the next time those things come up and you see an opportunity to display it the way that they changed it from before, and you realize that, oh, well, they didn't do this, but like, hey, make a note of it. Say, hey, I remember 2 months ago that the client really liked this style. Do we think we should go with this style now? And that may help you catch some of those changes down the road. So it's all about learning, experience, and taking some notes, and eventually things will get a little bit smoother.
Do you have anything that's kind of personal to you, like that you've kind of gathered over this time, where you kind of like, hey, have a shorthand of like in a meeting or something, take a note to yourself, or have
Oh
you?
man, yeah, like absolutely. I used to keep like an open like Word thing open just to take notes. I've actually switched that to OneNote now because OneNote's pretty cool. You can have all the tabs and all the things open there. You can kind of keep track of all your notes. Like with all the different projects I have, you can keep different notebooks in place there. So like if I was to show you on screen right now with my one pad, look like it'd be ridiculous. It's just a bunch of different projects all over the place, all the things I'm in, and it just helps me keep organized, right? You timestamp it with the date so you can refer back to it just in case there's any like, oh, well, I don't remember what we talked about X, Y, and Z. I'm like, okay, hold on, let me take my notes. All right, I remember on May 5th of 2022, we did this right here. And then like, it's just a way to keep organized. And like, if you take a little bit of extra steps to stay organized, retrieving that information and trying to get all those things done, it becomes a whole lot easier.
Is there so you have those methods that you use in order to kind of keep yourself up on technology, things that happen with the client or internal teams that you jot down notes for. You're giving yourself grace. The fact that you might make some mistakes. You kind of got to add to the timeline in terms of, hey, the client may change, right? And like you said, don't become attached to that because it may shape it in whatever form that it becomes. And we talked a little bit about keeping yourself uh, up to date and like surveying what's going on in the industry. So that same thing happens, right? Like what UX or design look like, what front end design look like, how we handle the back end, how things talk to each other, right? Continues to grow, right? So when you envision your career, right, and now things are changing, how do you deal with that in terms of the way things are shifting and the fact that, hey, you might need to go learn a new set of technology. You might need to kind of brush up on something that, hey, at this point you've done it enough times that you've got it pretty well down, except we're not doing it like that anymore. How, how do you address that?
I mean, it's honestly, it's the nature of the business. When I decided to be a technologist, the one thing I said to myself is what attracted me to tech. It was that I know that using the skill set in tech that I can pretty much build or create whatever I wanted to create, right? But I also realize that also means that this is a fast changing thing, right? And I won't be bored. And that was one of the other attractive parts to it. It's like I know I won't be bored. There's always going to be something to learn because somebody's always going to create something new. I guess for me that kind of excites me. It's like, okay, there's a new thing to learn. Okay, now for me is how can I apply it to either my job, a personal project, or X, Y, and Z? Because everything I learn, I may not actually apply to my job at BlackRock. It may not, it may not qualify, and that's okay. Like there's a cool thing called Flutter where you create like cross-platform mobile apps, right? We don't do mobile apps at the moment at BlackRock. Who knows, that may change, at least to my knowledge. But I've been able to kind of like help a friend build their own mobile app, right? So like the knowledge is never wasted. And for me, as long as, I don't think there's ever a case where you can learn too much, right? Like it's just another tool in the utility belt and you just pull it out when you're ready. So like even if you just take it, be like, oh, this is a cool technology. I don't know if I'll need it. Bookmark it, and whatever your favorite web browser is, bookmark it and come back to it, right? Like so for me, the ever change is actually good because as long as I can try to keep up with them, I have a reference point. So when somebody does bring it up, it's like, oh yeah, I remember I read that article there, and you already seem like you're the subject matter expert, even though it's brand new to everybody else.
Right. Has there ever been something coming down the pike and you're like, I'm gonna let that one go by?
Let's see. I haven't quite touched Go as much as I want to. I think that's one of those languages. So there's a couple scripting languages there that I haven't really touched. I think Python has been updating itself for a while, and I've been kind of letting that go just because I haven't had to use it as much. But my philosophy on that is, if a coding language exists, there is a purpose and there's a place for it. And just because I personally haven't hit it yet doesn't mean that I won't hit it soon. So I haven't necessarily like dismissed those ones that I've named. There's a bookmark somewhere in my Google Chrome, and when the time comes that I need to hit it, I know exactly where I need to go look.
Right. So part of, I guess, how you make peace with the ever-changing things is sometimes it's not the right time yet, right? It's not,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's not the right time. It hasn't worked its way into something that you need to know, and it might not necessarily be as cool to you, like to pull you in that direction to do a project in it on the side yet, right? But it's in your purview, and and if the need arises or when the need arises, you'll come back around to it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, just try to be aware as much as anything. You have to be an expert in everything, but just being aware is about 50 to 60% of the battle.
Okay, say
So
that again. Say that again.
absolutely. So you don't have to be an expert in everything. You just kind of have to be aware. And being aware is about 50 to 60% of the battle.
Okay, right. And I think you said a moment ago sometimes that you're aware of things, right? And you've done some reading, and all of a sudden you're just mentioning it or you're talking about it, and now that kind of makes you the subject matter expert because you've looked into something that your peers have not, right? Just because you saw it coming and you looked at it and said, hey, that's interesting, you read a couple articles, And now people are turning to you because they say, oh, you know more about this or you seem more knowledgeable. And to you, you may be like, well, all I did was read these couple of articles, but right?
Yeah, man, that's all it takes sometimes is you just knowing a little bit more than somebody else, and they're like, okay, well then let's give this to you. And who knows, on your job, that could be enough to then put you in that leadership role that we were talking about, right? Okay, we want you to take the lead on this new technology that we haven't had, and we're gonna trust your research capabilities, and then you bring it back to us, and then you can kind of like lead those discussions. You may not be making all of those decisions, but your input is now worth something. It's valid, and therefore you've raised your stock at whatever job you're at the moment.
Okay. To what degree do you say that you have to, as you've moved through your career and your journey, have to make people aware of what you know, right? Not just doing your job, but are there come a time where I need to speak up and let people know that, hey, these are some things that I have been looking into, that I do know about this. Like, how do you handle things like that?
Gotcha. So um, one of my first managers ever, I had to face that run my first job, right? I was a little timid coming in, it's your first time in there. And it was the development lead, right? So he's over all the development projects. And he pulled me into his office one day, and kid probably been in there for about 6 months. I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? So he pulls me in there. He's like, hey, I know that you know what you know. Okay. You've displayed it. Have a voice, right? You've done the work. You've put the effort in. Have a voice. So to answer that question, to pull it around, I always remember that. And I say, if I feel as though that I have an expertise in something, speak up on it. Even if you think that it might not fit or that it might not be the time, if you just have a small inkling that it might be helpful, say something. You never know. Your manager or your team could be like, hey, that's a really great idea. Let's go for it. Or they can be like, you know what? I hadn't really considered that. We're not quite ready to go yet, but we'll keep that in mind. Either way, they know that you are willing to kind of put yourself out there and put ideas out there. So the next time you have a brainstorming session or something like that, they'll come to you like, hey, we know that you have opinions on things, right? Some people get ignored in conversations because people just assume that they do not have an opinion. And the way that you can show people that you do have an opinion is just by sharing it, right? But also be ready to accept the feedback that comes from sharing the experience, right? It may not always be good, but you shared it. And I personally believe that sharing feedback and, sharing your opinion and getting feedback on that positive, positive or negative, you can build on it.
That's something that I think a lot of people need to hear, right? That they need to kind of speak up and they need to let people know what they're capable of, not just doing what it is that's on the sheet of paper, that's on the specs. Um, to again, if you have a difference of opinion, that again, kind of like you said, sometimes that's how that fact that you have learned about some other technology might make its way into the conversation. Um,
But yeah.
yeah, you making suggestions that people hadn't thought about, but sometimes that feedback is not as well received as we might like. But sometimes, like, hey, it's not the right time, right? Based on other concerns, not just the technology, but what the client wants, what the group wants. I think one of the things that you have kind of alluded to is that people who go into this profession really like shiny new things. Right? And so sometimes, like, hey, there's something that just came out, and instead of doing a side project, like, hey, how about we throw that in the mix in what we're doing? And it might not be the right time to refactor everything in a new framework or something, but maybe it has some benefit, and we might address that later. But like you said, you go ahead and you put that out there, and but you have to be willing for people not to receive it for many reasons. Um, do you have um, anything that you're looking forward to doing going forward in your career that you're kind of like projecting out, like in terms of like leadership growth or those type of things that you're preparing yourself for, um, that you would want to share in terms of like how you do that, not just like where you are in your role or what your company is looking for, but like where you're trying to get to.
Right. I guess personally for me, man, I am trying to learn as much as I can under the sun, right? Like I am enjoying my time at BlackRock. It has been great. But it's that skill set thing, right? Like you take the skills with you. So I'm trying to gather as many skills as I can. I guess the next steps in my career now, I'm looking to be more into that leadership role now, like wherever it may be. So I've been doing some studying on some things about like how to, what management type skills, right? Like how do you be a people manager, man? What does that look like? How do you like adjust to that? Because that's probably where the next step for me is, right? Is to maybe be a part of, maybe manage a small team at some point in my career at some point, right? But management is a whole nother, thing, right? Now you really have to understand people, you have to understand the technology, and you have to understand the business, right? And that's kind of where the divide kind of starts, right? Like some people don't want to touch that at all, and they want to go straight into tech, and then that's where you get the tech leads and the architects, right? So I'm kind of I'm at an impasse, if you will, right? I'm trying to decide like how deep into management do I want to go, how deep into architecture I want to go, and I'm trying to figure it out now. So I'm doing a lot of reading. I'm taking a lot of management courses now, trying to figure out like, is this something I want to do? Is it something that I feel like I could put in my wheelhouse? But I honestly think just learning a little bit of it as you go is enough to really give you a little bit to say, hey, at least I'm aware of these techniques, and if you need me to do this, that I can do it.
Do the options you see in front of you based on where you started out in terms of where technology has gone, would the younger you look at this, the person who was tinkering before, and look at some of the stuff in terms of the state of technology and be kind of wowed, or would we be like, hey, I thought we'd be here sooner, or like like what do you think about the state of tech?
Oh man, tech moves so fast. No, if you would have told me like we have like really nice portable like phones and computers and all that, like no, like when I started this, man, my computers had floppy disk, and most people probably don't even know what a floppy disk is at this point. But like, yeah, if you told me like where I started from where I am now, oh, absolutely not, man. I love it, but it gets me excited because I always know that I am going to have something new to do, and I also know that with this skill set, I will always be able to find someone who wants my skill set and wants to hire me. And having those two things is probably like the best thing that tech has ever given me.
Wow. Okay. That's that's great. You're really seeing an alignment with who you are as a person and what you do. And I think that's what a lot of people are trying to find who might be switching over is the opportunity to bring their creativeness or their like whatever the things are that challenge them into their work and creating an alignment. And so the fact that you're seeing that and that you're able to grow and you're still fascinated by what we get to do is something that definitely people want to hear and that you're thinking about growth. So, serious question now.
Okay.
Android, Team iPhone, what's your
Oh,
tech?
you're asking me team Android or team iPhone?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Got you. Let me, okay. So ask me that one time. I think my audio broke up a little bit. Try that one more time. Just
Okay.
so I make sure I heard it right. You said,
Yeah.
say it
Team
again?
Android or Team iPhone?
Oh, Android all day.
Okay, okay. So tech is one of those things where you can start a flame war with with just that question by dropping it on
Oh,
social
absolutely.
media, asking people like what it is they do in terms of like, hey, what is the tech stack you're on? Like Angular versus React people, all that kind of stuff. And but it's still fun. Like we all like tech. We all like those type of
Oh,
things. And so
absolutely.
right. So kind of the entry of that question was that being a technologist, right? Like what kind of things are you into technology wise, right? In terms of like cool gadgets or those type of things that, I know you mentioned gaming. Like so are there any things that you added that again, not for work, just feeding that need for technology in your life?
Oh man, absolutely. Matter of fact, like this week, I literally just got a Steam Deck. So it's like this portable gaming PC is essentially what it is, but it's kind of cool because it's like you can basically take your entire like library of video games with you. But it does a little bit more than that. Like it's a Linux-based system on the inside, right? So like it's probably one of the first of its kind to really do what it does. It other people have tried it, but I don't think they've actually having the success that Valve is having now. So yeah, that's probably one. Yeah, me tinkering with computer parts like isn't anything of the past. I literally just built my PC that I'm talking to you on right now. Like
Okay.
I did that not too long ago. Yeah, man. I collect video games as a hobby, so like I probably have them everything from like the Xbox Series X to PS5 all the way down to like the original Nintendo that I had to fix. But yeah, man. So like, man, I love tech, man. I'm a techie, a little bit of a nerd, and I own it. I own it all the way through.
So I'll admit to like looking through your social media. So in terms of like looking and seeing like, hey, your family man, when the wind down is happening, taking your mind off of technology and just spending time to de-stress. Like what types of things are you into in terms of like something to do on a Saturday or just to close the laptop and enjoy.
Gotcha, man. So when I'm off the screen time, man, normally me and my wife, my dog will go to like a park or something. We'll try to walk around. Atlanta's a great spot for a lot of parks around. So like you just pick a direction, find a park and kind of go there. Um, Me and my wife also have this thing we got going on where Atlanta's a big food spot. So we always try to find like she's really good on finding different food spots on Instagram. So we literally just pick a random spot that she's found like, okay, we're gonna go try that this week. And we just kind of ride out there in any part of the city and hey man, it's a good time just kind of getting out there and just, stepping away from the screens, breathing some fresh air and actually, looking at people like face to face, especially after COVID, right? Like
Right.
we all need more face to face time after COVID.
Yes, yes, we do. We're all getting back out there and facing individuals, getting back used to being around people. If you have that option to not be
Absolutely.
around people for a while and getting back into that habit, exploring nature. I think I did some walking, so kind of like what you're saying, getting out in nature, getting some sun on your skin. So all that's good. I think that people really want to get to know individuals to know like what their journey is like. So we've touched on that to kind of get to understand like how you got to where you are. The fact that you're working on things that you still enjoy, that you kind of have some career trajectories, some adversity that you faced, but you have a plan in order to do it. You're out there, you're mentoring, those type of things. Um, are there any other tidbits that you'd like to share in terms of what you think either someone who's new or someone who's in it right now who is trying to either reignite their passion right now or to kind of say, hey, here's how I order things, in the way you do, so that they become comfortable with the changing environment of tech.
Right. So like I said, tech for me was a gateway to a whole lot of different avenues. And the longer I got into tech, I realized that in tech, you can work in just about any industry that you so desire, right? So if you have a desire to work in automobiles, whether it be healthcare, whether it be fintech, like the world is really open to you. If you can put a couple lines together, have some pretty decent logic. Um, yeah, man. So my advice to everybody is who's getting into tech is try to align tech with something that you love, right?
Mhm.
And then from there, try to build a career out of it. And also be okay realizing that we're people. We change every day. If at one point you feel like you want to be in the automobile industry and the next minute you want to go into entertainment, tech can help you with that transition, right? Like, so be open to change, allow yourself to grow, and then allow tech to lead you into whatever direction you want to go in.
That's good to hear, right? To find out that you can change as tech changes, and if you make a change, right, that you can try and combine those two things, right, and that things are continuing to explode. Things that were smaller now are larger in terms of, hey, maybe you wanted to be on this side. of development. You move on, you're talking about expanding your leadership skills and those type of things so that people can kind of, move around within the tech space um, and still find themselves there. Um, so I want to bring the conversation to a close here, but you're an employee of BlackRock, right? And we got a lot into you, but upcoming on the 29th, we're going to speak with you and some other of your coworkers, and you're going to give us kind of like a bigger picture of like what life is like at BlackRock itself and what you guys do there. And we just want to get people out in order to have that conversation. Um, are there anything that you think a person is going to find exciting, right? If they, when they show up to that discussion, kind of give them a little teaser about life at BlackRock in terms of what you do.
Got you. So all the technologists at BlackRock, super open, super collaborative, right? You're going to get that feel. We have a moniker. We say one BlackRock, but it basically means that we're all in this together. Everybody's going to pitch that. You're going to feel that on the panel. Um, if you have any questions, right, we're going to be super open. We're going to be super candid. We're not going to try to like bring any fluffer in that. So if you want like the real scoop of what it is working in fintech and working at BlackRock, come check us out on the 29th. I look forward to seeing everybody there.
All right, thank you. And I thank you from everybody who's watching and for you giving us this time and sharing so openly about how you got to where you are and letting us know a little bit also about your life. All right. Thank you again, Jerry.
Yeah. Appreciate you, Mark, man. And thank you, Technologies of Color, for the opportunity.
All right.